campers, this is Darren with My RV Works, and today we're up here in Port Angeles, Washington, up out on the Olympic Peninsula. Now, when I travel around, we do mobile service out here on the Olympic Peninsula and the Kitsap Peninsula, and when I'm traveling around, I carry a trailer behind my truck. That trailer is my mobile shop. It's my toolbox on wheels, if you will. Now, it's got two axles, which is common for a lot of RVs out there that are the tow behind, like your fifth wheels and your travel trailers. And the manufacturer states that every 12,000 miles or every year you should inspect your brakes on those trailers. You should inspect your bearings and maybe even repack your bearings. And it's time for me to do that on my service trailer. So I figured, well, hey, let's bring you along on that journey. Now, on most of my videos, I'm actually, you're following me along on a repair, and it's a discovery, it's a troubleshoot. On this job, I know what I'm going to be getting into, so I decided, let me start this video a little differently. So what I've done is I've laid out the tools that I think I'm going to need to do this job. Now, I'm a mobile RV repair service, so I don't have a shop that you bring your RV to. I bring the shop to you. So the first thing is this plywood board that I've got. I'm going to put that underneath where I'm working, and that's going to be my shop floor. I'm going to use paper towels. I've got some knee pads, some rubber gloves. I'm going to get into that in a second. A pair of channel locks. We're going to be pulling a castle nut off, maybe a cotter pin, an impact wrench with the socket that's the size of my lug nuts, some grease, a grease gun. I prefer the trigger kind. There's a pump kind, but I like that better. That device right there is for packing the bearings. You need a bearing seal. And then I've got a small block of wood right there. Plus you need a floor jack or bottle jack or something and a jack stand. Now, last night I started to make a video of me making these repairs. It started out because I didn't have good brake reaction on my trailer. And so that tells me, oh, hey, it's time to repack your bearings. You're supposed to do it once a year anyway. And it's been, I did it last February. So here it is, January. It's almost February. So it's been about a year. So I started this video last night. It was drizzling and it was dark. I had flashlights. But this is what I found on the opposite side of the trailer. And you can see the gouging out of that. That's supposed to be flat right there. And you can kind of see that it's not flat. It's anything but flat. Compare that to this one, you see that that's flat, right there. Okay, so when I saw that, also, let's look at the brake shoe right here, okay? The brake shoe, this one, compared to this one. So when I was seeing this last night, and I've already deleted that video, but when I saw this, you can either go and buy the individual pieces parts, but the gotcha is that I'm calling that a rotor. I'm not a mechanic, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know what this is. Call it a rotor. But the other one, this profile was in here, gouged in, and these bolts are recessed in, and the valley that it had carved out was about to hit that bolt. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get a new rotor here. And we could have reused this one, just put a new brake pad on it, get new brake shoes, or just buy a new one. Now, when you do this, there's a left side and a right side. And let me get these oriented here. Okay, so there we go. Okay. Now, notice how, okay, brake pads are at the bottom, or these are at the bottom. Notice how this one, the arm is on the right-hand side, but this one's on the left-hand side. This one came off the other side of the trailer. I've already done it. That's the one I did last night. And that's when I decided, well, here, let's make a more official video in the daylight when it's not raining. So when you buy these things, you need to make sure there's a left side and a right side. Now, once you get your trailer jacked up a little bit, I like to spin the wheel. Now, I haven't taken the wheel off, but I'm listening for anything wrong. Now, this one's actually pretty good. So almost a year's worth of time and thousands of miles. It's still spinning good, and there's not a lot of play in it. Actually, there's a teeny tiny bit of play. But another thing is I've got a gadget that I created myself. I plug it into my pigtail, and it energizes my brakes for 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off, 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. And that's something I can adjust the 2 seconds to whatever I want. That's a tool I made. It allows me to help troubleshoot some of these things. So failing that tool, you can pull that breakaway cable out. That's that little thing that's got a cable on it. You just pull that out, and there's contactors that are going to close inside that switch. And that should lock up your wheels, okay? And what's interesting is I've got my device on. I know it's working because I can hear the click over on the other side. Very subtle, audible click sound where that magnet is slamming into the side of the rotor. So I can hear that. But this one's not stopping. So we're going to remember this procedure right here, because when we put it all back together, and at the end of the video we're going to put it all back together, you're going to see that it's starting and stopping. So there's something wrong with the brakes inside here, and we're going to go in deeper and figure out what that is. So, but I did want to show you that when you're doing your brakes, jack your tire up, pull your breakaway cable, and spin your tire really good, and then go pull your breakaway cable, and that thing should stop right away. Mine's not, so that tells me there's a problem here, which coincides with what I'm experiencing driving this trailer. I noticed the brakes were kind of soft, so these brakes back here probably do work, these don't. And but hey, that is why we do an inspection once a year, every 12,000 miles. There's stuff going on inside of these wheels and hubs with brakes and bearings and things that we need to inspect. So now we're going to take the lug nuts off, and we're going to get this off. Two tools I forgot to show you were a hammer and a putty knife. You can kind of whack it here, but when I whacked it there, it'll dent that. So little putty knife action, and you can kind of work this loose. There we go. And you're not damaging it. So I like to see that a little bit more filled with grease. So hey, it's time. And I also noticed there's a little bit of water in there. So that's something we'll note. Now we got the cap off. We'll take our, I've already started to get this cotter pin out. I do not reuse cotter pins. My school of thought is if it's been bent, it's been fatigued, therefore let's get a new cotter pin. They don't cost much, so when you do these jobs, a new cotter pin is in order. At least that's my philosophy. Now that we got the cotter pin out, now the cotter pin's off on the side. On some, there's a Zerk fitting right here, which means grease gets put in, and I'll show you where that comes out on the inside of this. So if you have a wet bolt or a Zerk fitting, then the cotter pin's going to be on the side. If it's not, then it's going to go through the center. But the cotter pin holds this castle nut, and usually the castle nuts are not tight, but you know that's why I like the channel. Castle nut, because it looks like a castle. How about that? Yay. Now when we pull this hub out, there's going to be a smaller bearing here and a larger one on the inside. So we're going to pull these out. This is the smaller bearing. Now when I do this, there's a flat washer here. I'm going to put them off to the side. Now what I'm looking for in this bearing is any evidence of heat fatigue, and that shows up in purple sometimes. So I'm looking at all my bearing races. I'm looking for any purple. I'm also looking in there for any purple. I don't see any purple. If it was really hot, then the grease would have dried up. Sometimes, but I'm looking for any play. This bearing feels okay. I'm feeling comfortable reusing this bearing, so we're going to repack this bearing with new grease. I think he's going to be fine. I don't see any problems there. So then we're going to pull this rotor off. Hub. Is it a hub or a rotor? I don't know. Let me know. Make a comment. Hub or rotor for you mechanics. I'm more on the electrical side of the fence than the mechanical side of the fence. But so we're going to pull this off. Okay, we're going to look inside. Now, I see a groove in I'm going to call this thing a rotor, okay? That's what I'm going to call. So, I see a groove. I can see it now. I'm going to try to hold it at an angle. You see the bolts. You could see, I can't point because I'm using both hands, but one is just the one on the bottom left there. It's starting to touch that bolt, isn't it? And there's quite a valley there. Also on this brake pad, it's not doing very well either. And now what I want to do, see, when this brake engages, when it gets hit with electromagnetic field, it's supposed to engage and pull forward. And when I'm pulling forward, if you watch up here, okay, see how it's separated the calipers there? Right in here, it separates them. And so what that does is that puts pressure on the inside of this thing. So those brake shoes are riding on the inside of the drum here. So the brake engages on the side and it pulls us apart. Now, this could probably, it was time to do this. Again, I'll repeat. Every year, do this to your trailers. Every year. Look what I'm dealing with on my own trailer here. Look what I'm dealing with. So, yeah, this has got a lot of rust. It's still intact. we could have probably got a new one of these, new brake shoes and a new pad. But like I said, I'm going to replace the whole thing. On the back of this here is where I've got my wires feeding the brake, the electromagnetic brake. So you see I've got my probe stuck on the inside here. Now let me show you my meter, if I can get in here. So you'll see my 2-second, where is it, 12 volts, 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off, 2 seconds on. So I know that my brake here is getting energized. Now, pull that out. Let me bring it around to the front. That was kind of tight. Let me move you around to the front here. And so if this creates an electromagnet, then this should be, you know, magnetizing this pad here. Right? So let me show you on the new one. Since we're at this point, let me compare our results here. We know we're getting 12 volts to this electric brake. Back in science class, you used to take a wire and wrap it around a nail and connect it to a battery, and you made it an electromagnet. Well, that's basically, they just grew up and they did this. So this is not sticking. So let me compare this to the brand new one, and we'll show you the difference in results there. Now, I've got a 12-volt power source here. Basically, everybody always teases me because I have my 12-volt tools. Well, guess what? I can do this with a 12-volt tool battery pack. Do that with your 18 or your 36-volt. Now, magnet's not on. There's no magnetism here. So when I connect this, I'm energizing it with 12 volts. And look, it's stuck. Okay? So I'm pulling up on it. I'm gonna release. It just released. So that's what this other brake pad should be doing. I should be engaging that, and the other one's not. We've taken the bolts off the back side, and so this just comes right off. Now on some of your hubs, there's a Zerk fitting that you have these little rubber caps you pop off, and there's a Zerk fitting right there. What does that do? What's its purpose? So what I want you to do, and we're gonna see this when we put all the things back together. We're gonna be pumping the grease in, and we'll be rotating our tire. But since it's at this point, I wanted to show you. So I'm gonna take my grease gun, I'm gonna attach it to my Zerk fitting, and I want you to watch right there. And well, let's make sure that stays on. Right there. Okay. So when I squeeze, look how the grease is coming out of that one hole in the back there, back where that larger bearing sits. So when you're pumping grease in here, it's filling in on the back side, right where that bearing is, and you're going to want to fill this whole cavity up with grease so that it's readily available. I'd rather have grease in there than water. But since I was at this point, I figured, well, hey, this would be a good time to show you where the grease goes when you pump it in on one side. Some people just assume, it's going to fill everything. Well, no, it's only that one spot right there. So when you're putting grease in, you kind of also need to rotate your tire to have this not just fill this one spot, but you'll be spinning your tire as you're also putting grease into it. Now it's time to get the second bearing out. Now I'm going to be scrapping this drum, I think is what we're going to be calling this thing, is a drum. I'm going to be scrapping this, so I don't really care if there's dirt on the inside of this one. We've already got the bearing out of this side, but there's a bearing back on this side, and there's a couple ways to get those out. Sometimes a claw hammer in there to grab it really good, and you just kind of step on this side with your foot, and it pops that out. So I'm going to try that with the camera off because I want to use both hands, but we're going to pop that grease seal off to gain access to that larger bearing in the back. The claw hammer trick worked. It just popped right out, and so that's trash. You don't reuse your grease seals, so that's a grease seal. And now we're going to grab that bearing. Okay, now we're actually going to repack these bearings. Okay, so I've got this one taken out, and again, we're going to inspect it. Besides my gloves being purple, what we're going to do is we're going to look to see, is there any of these cylinders, any bearings that are discolored, and when they get discolored, they turn a purple color. We're going to clean this up, and we're going to inspect the bearing. The bearing looks good. I don't see any problems. I'm okay with reusing this bearing. Yeah, I have no problems with this bearing. It's fine. We just need to repack it with some new grease. So, to do that, I've got one of these little gadgets. I attach my grease gun to this fitting, and it pumps it in. So this unscrews. I'm going to do the big one first because he's the first one we need. And so we're just going to put him in like that. So there's a hole down here. So when grease gets inserted here, it's going to come out that hole and force its way through the bearing. Alright, so there's a bearing in there. He's kind of capped off, just finger tight. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to attach to that, and we'll watch the grease come out of there. So I've got my hand pump, I'm pumping it. There we go. Okay, so now you see the old grease forcing its way out, and I'm going to do this until it comes out. My grease is green, so I'm going to do this until I get all green all the way around. And then I know I've got all the old grease out and the new grease in. Okay, so it comes undone, and then we can look inside, we can see, and then if we unscrew this, okay, so it filled that whole void with grease, and the only way for it to get out is to squeeze through here. So that's what it did. So that grease, or that bearing, has been repacked. Alright, so that goes on like that. We're going to use new lock washers and new bolts to attach all of this together. Not a fan of reusing old bolts. Owning to the idea that once it's been on a bolt, once a nut's been on a bolt, it can fatigue it. So if we've got new bolts, we'll use new nuts, if all that makes sense. Hey, you could reuse the old ones if you want to, but I like using new hardware. I've got my hub on, and I've already made the connections on the back. And I'm using the same exact test that I did before, 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. And I want to, okay, so there we go. It's grabbing it, and it just let go. There, 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. Now remember, the other one was not doing that. So there was a failure inside that brake here that was not engaging my brakes. So we fixed the problem. So somewhere in here, a wire got too hot. Who knows what goes on inside of these things? But so that part's been fixed. So now when I press my brakes, it will engage. And this is actually getting kind of hot. Let me actually show you something with another meter. Okay, folks, it just doesn't get any better than this. Darren's got all the fun tools. So I got 130 over there. So when you're riding your brakes, guess what? You're heating all this up, and it's true. We see it right here, 122 I just saw. Here's the part we're going to get greasy. I got my nice pretty purple gloves on, and all this is freed up. So now it's inevitable. We're going to get greasy. So there's a little bit of rust in there. Rust is going to act as a contaminant with my grease. So I want to get as much as I can out. So remember this guy that we packed the bearing, right? So now I've also got a jug of the same exact grease that I use in my gun. So I'm going to just kind of... So we're going to get that in there. Try to get some of my fingers clean here to grab this bearing with my clean hand. So we've got a repacked bearing. I really don't want the old grease in here. If I can help it, it's going to act as a contaminant, and we don't want that in our new grease. So there we go. Now, we had used a small block of wood in our inventory of tools that we were going to use, right? So at this point, you need to put in a new grease fitting, a grease seal. So that's here. It's all of $2.39. Okay. If I could grab it, make sure it's not, I didn't just contaminate it. Now, I've seen where some guys will take some gasket seal and they'll put around here. It's not a bad idea. I'm not going to do it because, well, to be quite honest with you, this job's taken a lot longer than I was. Normally this is a 15-20 minute operation, but I really wanted to make a good video. I wanted to go into more details, but I still have 3 more of these things to do. So then this is where the block of wood comes in handy. You put it right on the top, and you grab your hammer and you whack it. And there we go. We're perfectly sealed all around. So I'm running my finger around to make sure that it's even, that it's not high on one side and low on the other. Okay? Now that that part's done, so now our rear seal is done. It's been repacked, it's been reseated, and the next part, I'm going to put some grease on my spindle here. I've examined my spindle, I've looked at my spindle. Again, I'm looking for discoloration, that it got hot. I do not see that. So therefore, I'm feeling pretty comfortable about putting it in. Now, I just got some grease on my brake pad. We're gonna have to clean that really well here. In fact, let me do that because we don't want grease on our brakes. So we got everything cleaned up. Our spindle's been lubed. This is the new surface that's gonna go against that. I don't wanna touch it because I don't wanna... When you're doing this, you wanna make sure that that does not get greasy, because then you've just shot yourself in the foot, kinda. So everything looks good. All of my parts look good. There we go. Now, there's that part. That's on. Next, we're going to repack another bearing. You saw how I did that. So I'm going to repack another bearing, this smaller bearing here. I'm going to repack him, stick him in there, and that's what we'll pick me up on the other side after I get this bearing repacked. All right, I've repacked my smaller bearing that goes in the front here. I'm going to try to take a small finger of this, and what I want to do is get some grease in here. We're going to be filling this. Remember that Zerk thing? We're going to be filling this with my grease gun, but you know, if I can pre-pack it before I do that, that would be kind of nice. So there we go. And now we'll unscrew this. Okay, so this is going to go in there like that. Now we have this flat washer. This now goes in here. So now I'm cleaning out the castle nut, just getting some of that old grease off. Again, I don't want that old grease to be a contaminating agent with my new grease. Now, question is, how tight to do this thing? What I do is finger tight, and a quarter turn tighter than that, and then I back it off, is my rule of thumb. So we're gonna tighten that. Okay, so now I'm tight, right? Everything's tight, and I feel a little bit of tension as I'm turning this. So now I'm gonna come off a quarter turn. So for example, if my channel locks here are straight down, a quarter turn would put me right there. You don't really want play in this, and you'll feel it. Like if I were right there where I was, I do feel a little bit of play. You might even be able to see that grease moving there. I think that's a little bit too loose. So finger tight, that play is gone. All right, so then we need to line up our hole. It's right there, right through here is where my cotter pin's gonna go. So I will next put a cotter pin through, bend it up, snip it off, and cap it off, and then we'll play with our brakes, and we'll be done. So we're going to run a cotter pin through. Where's my friendly hammer? There we are. I hear that clicking sound. I'll be quiet. Listen. Subtle clicking sound is my 2-second brake test. So I'm gonna. It's. I can't move it. Now I'm gonna spin, and the brakes just locked up. Locked up again. Yay! My brakes work. They weren't doing that last time. So now I'm gonna bend these cotter pins up. Okay, watch your eyes. Snipping. One more. Okay, yeah, you're safe now. So there's that. Now, I'm gonna do, I got my brakes on, yes. I wish I wouldn't, but anyway, now we're going to plug that in, and we're gonna rotate this while I'm pumping. Pump, pump, pump. Rotate, 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 rotate. Pump, 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 pump. I'll know it's filled when my pumping starts oozing out that opening right there. But you see, if I didn't rotate it when I'm pumping, then I might have some voids in there. I just saw an air bubble pop out of it. So I'm just steady pumping it in there until we fill all the... There it is. Okay, now look, watch this. Watch, let me rotate a little bit. I'm gonna squeeze. See how it's starting to ooze out? Now I know I'm full. I'm gonna rotate a little bit more. So yeah, everything's oozing out all the way around. So guess what? I know that that whole cavity is filled with grease now, and we're good. So if grease is in there, I'm not going to have water in there, and I'm just going to do just a teeny bit of cleanup right here, because next is I'm going to put this cap on here. And here's my block of wood. So clean that up a little bit. When I got the new rotors and hubs and drums and everything, I went ahead and got these new caps because the other ones are all rusted. And so there you go. And now we have a new little rubber piece here. I got those too. When we started this whole project, I was telling you that my brakes were getting soft, and we were talking about when you do this, jack up your tire and pull your breakaway cable out. Okay, so this, I'm going to spin my tire there. So with my breakaway cable, I wouldn't be able to spin it, but spin it, spin it, spin it, and have somebody pull your breakaway. I work by myself, so I made myself a 2-second on-off deal. So now I know my brakes are working, yay! And I've also got a good repack bearings, and everything's good. In fact, I've got all new parts in there. So, yay! Hey, if this video was helpful to you, please thumb it up, subscribe, share it with other folks. And we're constantly making new videos when I work on these RVs, sharing different things. So this is Darren signing off. I've got actually 2 more of these to do. I did one last night in the rain, and I've got 2 more to do tonight. And so I'm going to try to pick up the pace a little bit. So I will sign off right now and get the rest of these done. So like, subscribe, share, and happy campers say my RV works. This is Darren signing off. Bye-bye now.